Hello, 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 and welcome to the Loudcast with me, your host, Kevin McLean. I am still here, still in my flat in Leith, and still bringing you some of the very best of spoken word. We have a tip-top show for you today, guys. We've got an incredible special guest in the way of Crosbie. We've got the debut of our brand new Return to Form series, and we have a video shot back when we could still do gigs at the Scottish Storytelling Centre from Gray, our guest, so that's going to be really exciting. We're also going to be diving into a whole bunch of subjects with We're going to be chatting to them about Return to Form, which they're taking part in. They'll be doing a Sestina later on in the project, but we'll be talking to them about this first episode, the work Rachel and Tawana did, and we'll be diving into their work on the Green Political Party broadcast, on the BBC Social, on their solo shows like Amphibious, so much more. It's going to be a really good show, and if you have been enjoying the show, please make sure to give us a little like below, subscribe to the YouTube channel, or follow us on whatever podcast platform it is that you're listening. It really does help us out and helps us, get the show out there. It would be much appreciated. So please do that. But let's dive straight into things with Crosbie, Wrong Fairy Tale.
How do you know if your body fits or doesn't? Is it possible to be a changeling in your own skin? Where does the problem of my anatomical curves and angles end and the rest of the world begin? Is this the wrong body? Or am I just swimming in the wrong waters? Undercurrents pulling one direction while my blood flows another. Am I supposed to be wishing for fairy godmother surgeons and hormone magical potions? If I, ruby slipper, clicked a wish, what would my happily ever after look like? My body might be different. Or perhaps my happily ever after would be something more fantastical, like the appearance of a magical door on the wall between the men's and the women's. Or the sudden emergence of a new language, some genderless Elvish in which everyone is fluent. Or would it be my windows bursting open as enchanted clothing flies in, the kind not labelled man or woman where I Cinderella dance and spin in swirls of mask and femme, and everything, for once, is so perfectly fitting. Perhaps I'm less ugly duckling. Not so Little Mermaid scales for skin or frog prince needing kiss better, but in fact just a character miscast. Right body, but trapped in the wrong fairy tale, born in the wrong story. Happiness in progress, writing my own ever after.
That was Gray there, back at the Scottish Storytelling Centre. Oh, how I miss doing gigs. An amazing performance. Gray's an incredibly talented writer and performer. They came into the scene, relatively recently and just blew us all away. And it's nice to look back and see some of those standout performances. But we are going to be moving on. We only have 2 videos this week, but we do have 3 poems. There's 2 videos in the next one, 2 poems in the next one. So it's all good. Don't worry, we're not jilting you on the poetry content. That is just not us. But we are going to move on to Return to Form, our brand new series exploring poetic form and trying to encourage some spoken word writers to dive into that and get their feet wet with the form, as it were. So the first one that came out was a golden shovel, and we asked Rachel, Amy and Tawana Sit Holy to tackle that form, and the basis for the golden shovel is a poem from the Macker, Jackie Kay. So it was very nice of Jackie to allow us to use her poem, which was very kind of her. We're very excited to have her small sort of inclusion in the project, and I think Tawana and Rachel both did an excellent job tackling the subject, tackling the poem, and have come out with 2 beautifully unique and excellent pieces. I'm very excited for this. I will wax on about it no more. I will simply sit back and let you guys enjoy some golden shovels.
Return to Form is a project exploring different styles of poetry. We pair up 2 poets, challenging them to use the same form and the same inspirational material to show how totally different pieces can be created from the same starting point. Golden Shovel, poem using words from a source poem for its line endings.
My apology is in my feet, clattering as we are walking, lapping against the pavement, unheard by those whom I pass by. It isn't stopping, and I'm not sure what the best thing is I can do. I head to the waters, an early source high from the hill, trail slowly down till salt meets spring, then further out, where my apology slaps the side of a boat in an ocean greater than all my cells. I hear again the honest shout of gulls, mark my course from an overhead river of geese, and wait, while the tide shakes the sun loose from its day, and turns my hands into white-backed fish. All of this, with my apology still stirring, the queasy uncertainty set upon the sea. Ahead, on a small spit of land, there crouches a tree, shaped as a woman, shore bent, squat and thrown, saplings long passed down. I pause beneath her branches, reach my arms gently round the pocketed bark, and ask that my excuses leave me. I know her. We have met before. The shifts within my body, taste of cardamom and old apples, a chimney whisper of rain. There is air inside me that I'm slow to recognize. I'm granted a hearth, and under its watchful light, near the close-grown leaves, a circle of starlings graces the sky as I start to sound a clumsy, wordless penance. And if I stayed here, I would be done. If there were no pull to the Monday world, a pavement to stand on, a chance to dismantle dream or superstition, I wouldn't have to take the apology back into my bones or take leave of the tree. I could stay with the birds and the flames and the sky. I wouldn't have to sit with the worst of myself, know all the cities of my spine, sieve the dregs of decency and speak. I listen for permission to stay, but the tree is having none of it, and closes herself up for the day. Readying myself to return, I thank her. My apology and I, as ever, present in both past and future, pavement and imagination.
Thinking is a kind of walking, staying in step with passers-by, or coursing against the concurring current of calm waters. And it's a long way down from this lonely height where this rickety footing is just an expensive way of being honest. Loud is the mouth of this river as it snakes and shakes itself into cupped hands, chapped hands choking with untaken footsteps and the tiring tirades of a tidal sea. And who should swell here but a whirlpool wonder woman whose legend is past, has been passed round to me, by me, through me. A trusty tale to believe in, that think walking is not just a raging river running slow, but bangled wrist, ever watchful, timeful like the fireside circle, where inner strength is forged as story of memory, and the what if that decides the strides of you and I. Now and ever, then as it were, that taboo of us is just a shocking, walking superstition.
And that was our return to form, Golden Shovel from Rachel, Amy, and Tawana Sit Holy. It's the first in the Return to Form series. I'm super pleased with how it's come out. I'm very excited to see more. We're going to be releasing one every week with an accompanying workshop video. And yeah, it's going to be a very exciting project. If you haven't checked it out already, please do. There is a playlist. It should be linked in this video. You can go and check out to see all of the Return to Form videos. And here to chat about Return to Form, the video we just watched, but also their own work on Return to Form and so much more. I am joined by the wonderful Gray Crosbie. How's it going, Gray?
Yeah, good, yep. How are you, Kev?
Good. It feels like an eternity since I actually saw you. How's lockdown going?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just been lockdown, hasn't it? You know, I feel kind of like, yeah, is that weird, like, relief to be out of 2020, but it's kind of like, is 2021 much different, really, so far? It's kind of, yeah, it's a bit of a weird time. Yeah, how's your lockdown been?
Yeah, that's similar. I don't know why I haven't altered the intro to this show at any point. I keep asking people how it's going, and I'm like, I'm never going to get an answer other than terrible. It's lockdown. But no, it's been all right. I'm hoping better things come for 2021. But yeah, it's such an arbitrary thing, like line in the sand, that you're like, well,
yeah.
It makes no difference. What a cheery note to kick the Loudcast off on. But no, it's going to be good. I'm glad you're here. But we're kicking off in a big way. Like, you're involved in something that we're very excited to be doing in 2021. What did you think of... because this is the first one. We're recording this. There should be more have come out by the time folk are seeing this. But you haven't even seen your own Return to Form video yet.
I'm not, no.
But you have seen Rachel and Tawana's. So what were your first thoughts?
Yeah, really cool project. I mean, I was excited to be part of it when you first contacted me. But then after seeing the first video we've put together, yeah, definitely excited to be part of this. It was really just so beautifully edited, the way it was all done. So, yeah, it's a really exciting project.
So had you seen a Golden Shovel before? Is it a form you've attempted? Because you're like me, you write mostly freeform stuff,
I do,
right?
Yeah. Don't like those constraints. No, I'd never heard of Golden Shovel before. I actually had to Google it to see exactly what it was. But yeah, it's quite a cool form. I really like art that inspires other forms of art. So yeah, I really like that kind of aspect of it. It reminded me of like the acrostic poems used to write in primary school, but the kind of evolved form.
Yeah, it's like a slightly more sophisticated acrostic.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, no, it was really cool.
I hadn't thought of it like that. That is quite a good way to look at it. It's not because it's similar to kind of the form that you got, right? Because you're doing the Sestina, which is similar in the terms of its. So for those, I mean, you've just watched it, but if you want more information, the Golden Shovel takes an existing poem and takes each word and makes it the end of a line, so the end word of a line. And then Gray is working on a Sestina, which or has finished a Sestina, which then is a set of repeating words that kind of govern the whole poem. Katie does the technical poetry bits. I'm butchering the explanation of this. But yeah, kind of similar. Do you think you got a raw end of the stick? Do you think the Golden Shovel looks easier than the Sestina?
Yeah, I'm not sure. At the time, the Sestina didn't look too hard, and then as I kind of got into it more, yeah, it definitely it proved quite tricky. It's having that those dictated end words. I suppose the kind of the thing that made it harder was the fact that there was only the same words, the same 6 words that were repeated over and over, and finding different ways to use those words. That was the really challenging thing. I was a wee bit envious seeing the Golden Shovel, all those different words at the end, oh, I could have done with that, but I'm I'm sure it also definitely had its own challenges to write.
Yeah, it's a tricky, because I find it interesting as well, in terms of, because it was quite interesting to set the challenges, like with the Sistina, to sort of pick words and try and be as helpful as we could by using, homonyms and things like that. But then also with the Golden Shovel, of there's an important part of what poem do you pick, and I think picking Jackie Kay's In My Country is an interesting one, where it's, Jackie's the macker, so there's already an immediate pressure of having to write a poem off of such like a high profile poet and such a celebrated, like, wonderful poet. But I think it certainly gave very interesting, like, options of where you could go. Like, I was really intrigued to see what Rachel, Amy, and Tawana Set-Holy are two of my, like, favorite poets. They were people I saw when I first entered the scene, so it's like really nice to see them tackle it. And I thought they did it in such interesting, different ways. I don't know what you thought, like, stylistically, or how you would have approached it, or your kind of thoughts on how they went with it. But I thought it was really interesting how, like, Rachel went very narrative heavy, and Tawana went very kind of like much less linear, much less narrative based.
It's funny because, like, I mean, obviously I listened to Rachel's ones first, like, listened for the video, but then when it got to the second one, it was kind of like, I almost have to remind myself for a minute that these aren't linked poems, because of the way, like, having the same words did definitely, like, tie it together, which was quite interesting. But it was also, the fact that, like, they tackled it in totally different ways. They both had, like, quite just, like, different energies, which I found interesting. But they're both like awesome poems. Like, Rachel's had like some imagery which was really good. It was I wrote some notes down because I was like, oh, that was beautiful.
I never remember lines either. I was like, there's a line with, they say, bad quote,
The whole, the tide shaking the sun loose from the day, I think that was, like, my favourite line from Rachel's one. I was like, oh, that's just, like, there's just so much, like, beautiful imagery in it. And, like, the way she used...
back to the Monday world is one line that, like, stood out to me. I just love that encapsulation of, like, what the Monday world stands for.
Lots of really lovely lines. And then, like, the way they used the words as well, like with Rachel's... this idea of, like, an apology, but then using that word honest at one of the line ends, and it was just such a, like, a perfect word to use. And then I realised that was one of the words that was, like part of the original poem. So I was really impressed with that. I was like, that just, like, that moment just worked so well. And then really nice. Tawana's one as well was, like, it was obviously, like, so different, but, like, a totally, like, different take on it, but was also really impressive. I love the way he used, like, alliteration with, like, the like, when I was, especially, like, when he was describing water, there was, like the way he described, like, the tides, and then I think my favourite one was the concurring currents of calm waters. I thought that was just so good when you're comparing this idea of thinking to walking, and, going through the world. The way you think carries you through the world in the same way as, like, the way you could walk. They're both brilliant.
I love Tawana's style because of performance, because it's so rooted in live, like, the way he uses his voice and intonation and tone definitely is as integral to his work as, like, the words. Like, if you saw that poem written down, it wouldn't hit the same way, like, where he has the lines to me, through me, by me, or where he kind of repeats that me 3 times. If you read it dryly, it doesn't resonate, but the way he hits the inflection and changes it, like, it really pops his poem. Tawana's one of the best sort of live performers I've seen, and I think because his approach is so laid back and, like, chit-chatty, he feels like he's very much kind of spontaneously weaving these stories. I think it's missed how much, like, performance craft is behind what Tawana does. It's really cool.
Definitely.
I'm a big fan of it.
It does kind of feel like he's just, like, taking your hand and he's just taking a walk, like, through this lovely poem, and you're just, like, ambling along with him. He's, like, definitely lovely to listen to his performance. It like, adds to it so much. I think that was what's so cool about this project as well, is that you're getting the text but you're also hearing the poet perform it. It definitely adds that, like, other layer to it.
Yeah, it's nice. It's one of those things where, like, and you know the burden, right, Greg? Because you've been a poet in lockdown, so you know what it's like. You want to make stuff, but you don't want to make, a kind of just pale imitation of the thing that you normally do, or you always want to be making something better and pushing your creativity and pushing what you're doing and putting out, like, good stuff to present. And that can be tough when you're restricted by the limitations that are, put in because of lockdown. So, for us, that would normally be lots of like poetry videos from the show that we haven't run in a year, but that's not an option. So you try and pivot, and I think this was a way to like do something really different that it doesn't feel like it's lesser because of the lockdown. Like
Yeah.
I kind of got to a point in my making of stuff where I summed it up as, if lockdown ended, would I still work on this project? And like, if the answer's no, then it's probably a bit too, just reactive, and you should maybe focus on doing something that like you would do. And Return to Form was one of those ones where I was like, I would do this even if it wasn't, impossible to get poets in a room. So how have you found adapting and trying to find new stuff to work on?
Yeah, I mean, lockdown's been it's been tough. Like just finding motivation to write and finding like just that drive, just that kind of like need to write has been definitely not the same. So like having projects like this to work on was like really amazing because I had a deadline and I actually worked really well towards deadlines. I mean like they're stressful things, but they definitely help motivate me. So having this was really helpful.
I totally find the same. I've barely written anything like during the lockdown, but I wrote almost a poem every day for all of April because it was NaPoWriMo and I had to, and whether it was good or bad or whatever, whether I'll use it again is irrelevant. Like I was writing and then NaPoWriMo stopped and no one gave me any deadlines and I went, okay, I don't write anymore.
No, I was honestly like the exact same. I think like the first bit of lockdown, I was like, oh my god, I got so much free time to write. This could be amazing. Like I'm gonna like take advantage of this. And for a while, I was like, I was writing loads, and I managed like to like finish like some huge projects that I'd just kind of been sitting there for a while, and like it was all feeling so great. And then I think it did hit about, it was kind of like early, like late spring, early summer. And all that motivation just kind of went, and I felt like I wasn't writing anything. I felt like I couldn't write anything. So like having the deadlines helped, and then like I felt like I could kind of get going again. But it's also just kind of been like trying to, like not be too hard on yourself for not writing, and kind of accepting, okay, we're in a global pandemic. You don't need to be producing like amazing work right now. Like, and just being kind of like gentler with myself has been something I've had to, I feel like, kind of learn the past wee while, which hasn't been easy.
But then, I mean, if anyone is entitled to a break, like, you've been fairly prolific, because I sometimes forget, like, you're still somewhat of a newcomer to the scene, right? When did you start, like, doing spoken word?
So, I think I started doing spoken word in, when was it? 2017, maybe? I started kind of then, and then, but I didn't really like properly start performing, I don't think, until 2018, performing more regularly. I wrote for a long time before that, but it wasn't performance stuff. It's honest, I never ever thought I would do anything like performance based. I used to hate performing.
Oh really?
Me. Yeah, like I actually like leaving high school, I was like either wanted to go study creative writing or I wanted to go study music, and then I ended up going to study music, and I about dropped out my course and like really struggled with the performance side of the course, and then in fourth year I actually totally dropped performance completely and just did a massive dissertation. Wow. I was like, I'll just take all my credits in the dissertation, keep me off a stage, keep me away from an audience. Like I hated performing, like the anxiety was just not worth it. I felt horrible. I could not play, like I just couldn't, it was so bad. So I was really surprised to find I enjoyed like performing poetry, but like it's something different, and like I love it now. Like I'm missing it. Like I do like really miss being in front of an audience. Like Zoom performances are nice, but they're definitely not the same as being on a stage and having real people in front of you.
So what gave you the impetus then to give it a go, to actually get up and do some performance stuff?
I think I started going to Blind Poetics when it existed in Edinburgh.
It's where I did my first ever gig. Long live Blind Poetics.
Was that, sorry?
It was where I did my first
ever gig.
Long live Blind Poetics. It's much missed.
Blind Poetics was such a good night. I think I was doing I did like a short course, like a short wee like kind of improve your fiction course or whatever it was at Edinburgh Uni, and it was Gavin Ingalls who took that, and he performed a lot, and he performed, the thing is, he performed flash fiction mostly, and I mostly wrote flash fiction at that point. I was still very much like, I'm not a poet kind of phase in my life. So I was really resisting that for a while, and because he performed Flash, I was like, oh, like, I write flash fiction, maybe I could perform Flash, and I started kind of writing pieces that might kind of maybe work for performance. And to be honest, he really he helped me out. He actually he like met up with me and brought like a mic and let me like practice like performing, because I was so terrified, and he like literally like I think pushed me onto the stage on the first night. I was like so terrified, but it was great.
Honestly, that's brilliant though. That's brilliant that like he gave you the mic to practice with, because it's one of the things that's always blown my mind, because like I've run events for years, and the amount of like poets who are like seasoned poets that do a lot of stuff rock up to the stage and have no idea how to work a mic stand or a microphone.
It's terrifying. Like that was like the most terrifying bit, and it was
totally.
Like, I hadn't even considered that, I don't think, at this stage as well, because I hadn't even got up on a stage yet. So the fact the first thing he did was like, right, this is how you move a microphone, this is how you do that, this is where you speak into, this is just all the kind of the things that are really basic, but if no one shows you how to do them, you don't get that practice, and the time to practice is not when you first step up in front of an audience. Like that is not the moment to be like, oh, what does this do? I mean, I've seen poets with more confidence do that, but I'm not one of those people.
The thing is though, you're caught in that position of when are you going to practice, right? You don't think about it, and then you don't want to ask, because it makes you, especially if you've been booked for a thing or whatever, like you've got this slot, you don't want to look like the most inexperienced person. Oh, I don't know how to work the mic, and you don't realize that none of the other poets do, because none of them bother to learn. Like they've all been stuck in the same position, and so you're like, when do you ask? And so no one brings it up. It's why like the first thing when I've done performance workshops, the first thing I always do is like, okay, here's 5-10, here's how you work the mic stand. I'm going to give you 10 minutes, come up and have a play around with it, just to be like, be familiar.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, like, if there's a chance before a gig to like get up on stage and play around with the mic stand, I usually try and take it, because like you do find the odd one that's different, and then I also like run the risk of the person before me having stronger hands and less sweaty hands, and then I get up and if things are just not turning, and I'm usually shorter than everyone as well. Like and people I think I'm taller than I am, because if they set the microphone for me, it's always like up here, so like it always kind of has to be brought down again. But I mean, I also kind of use that like as kind of something that I try and kind of like joke about, being like, oh, I'm always so small, people always think I'm taller than I am. And it gives you that kind of wee moment to like, play around with it. And even if you're panicking inside and struggling to bring it down, it kind of like, I feel like at least kind of opened up a conversation with the audience. So if it's going badly, then you could, then you can kind of play on it and be like, like, oh shit, like this, and then, I think it takes the pressure off you a bit. I always think it's best
to open a set, always open a set with a joke if you can.
Yeah.
Like that's always the...
That's self-deprecating humor,
do miserable stuff. Like always try and like ingratiate yourself to the audience first.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's crazy. We ended up, because it's such a bugbear of mine with the microphone, I ended up buying like a clip release mic, so that ours is the easiest mic I've seen any poetry night use. It's the thing as well, like if you're a musician, you end up getting good equipment, whereas because poetry is no money, everyone's doing gigs in little bars. That's why we have beat up equipment. So I bought like a click release mic, so it's like, it's got the clasp at the top and you just push it and alter the height. Makes it so much easier.
Yeah, I do appreciate a good
to
mic
just
stand.
Avoid anyone being confused. I've totally derailed this conversation onto purely mic orientated stuff. So you started Blind Poetics and stuff like that and doing spoken word, but then you've done so much since, because you had your solo show Amphibious, right?
Yeah.
Which got rave reviews. People have been super chuffed with it. Like as a debut show, you must be super happy.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of just feels like a different life now. Like it just feels so far away. Like it just feels like a totally different time. And I'm someone who, the more distance I put between myself and something I've created, the more I just like criticise it. And for a while I was like, oh yeah, I really want to develop this, I want to do this again, I want to write something new, and I want to see where I can take Amphibious. But it's been so long since I've been near it, I've just kind of like put it in my head as like, oh man, that was probably terrible. So yeah, it's something I mean, I loved doing it. Like, it was such a really fun week. I did a week's run. I think it was like 7 nights. And I had an audience every night, which I was really happy about, because a lot of the rooms around me, they had to cancel their show for the night because of the rain. The rain that week was like so bad. But I managed to at least have, I think the quietest night I had like 4 or 3 people. So
for the Edinburgh Fringe, that is
I got like an audience at least.
A good success rate, man. Yeah. It was when I found out, I heard a terrifying statistic at one point, which was that the average first year Fringe show loses £2,000.
Yeah.
That's what it makes on average, minus £2,000. You're like,
No, it's crazy. I mean, I did it for the free Fringe, so at least I didn't have to pay like too much up front. I was really lucky that my dad stays just outside Edinburgh, so I literally like packed up my wife and my dog, and I took us all like to my dad's house, and we camped out like in one of the spare rooms on his mattress on the floor, and we just like went in and out of Edinburgh each day, and like we got like a bus ticket, so it was like, you know, like 50 quid or something, which saves so much money. I didn't have to pay the rent like that some people have to pay staying in Edinburgh for that month, which is insane.
Yeah, the Airbnb system in Edinburgh during August is calamity.
It's terrible. It's so bad. Yeah, it's just crazy. And I also heard it that like, you know, the people who do make most during the Fringe are like, you know, the biggest business owners, and then it kind of slowly trickles down. You know, smaller businesses make a bit more money and stuff like that. But then when it gets to the performers, we tend to lose money. Like you said, like, you know, you're minus £2,000, and it's just crazy because we're the ones bringing it. You know, it's madness.
Did you have plans to do the 2020 Fringe?
Yeah, I really hope so. Yeah, yeah, like I like put in an application for a free Fringe again. I was going to do more of a kind of like best of poetry show. I hadn't had time to write like a whole new like solo spoken word show, so I was going to kind of do like a kind of best of different poems and try and like tie that together. And I was kind of working on that and figuring out ways to do it, but then as like, you know, COVID progressed, I was just like this is not happening, let's just leave this now. like just accept that that's not going to happen. But it was like, yeah, I was sad it wasn't on. Missed it.
Because obviously you do a lot of work that's like, you know, like Amphibious and stuff, where it is a more coherent show, right? Like it leans into that maybe spoken word theatre aspect of things, which is where a lot of the scene has shifted, especially for Fringe shows. Like, you know, more and more people are doing it like, this is my 1 hour Fringe show, this is a coherent thing that stands by itself. Whereas I find it interesting because, like, obviously there is an aspect to that with stand-up or comedy or theatre, right, where you can do that, but you can also do just kind of straight stand-up, and less people are doing like, hey, I'm a good poet, I have good poems, why not come and see me do an hour of them type vibe that is like a more stand-up, I guess, traditionally does. Do you, like, have you got a stance on that? Do you prefer doing one thing or the other?
I mean, for that first show, I think it was definitely to kind of go with the more like spoken word theatre approach, because it could all be written and edited and rehearsed, and I didn't need to improvise too much. Because I mean, sometimes I feel like I can improvise okay, and I can do that stand-up kind of banter thing, and sometimes it doesn't go as well. It's something I think I'm still kind of, you know, learning to be comfortable with. But for this year, for last year, I was like thinking to go more down that kind of stand-up, kind of comedy poetry kind of route. But I still had like this idea of I was going to try and tie it together thematically somehow anyway, so if it did all go wrong and I was just not being funny, there was something to kind of fall back on and keep me safe. But that would have been a bit more of a push for me, I think, to do that than Amphibious.
Because I think it's more, it's that interesting thing where I see more and more poetry shows tending to try and blur the line of where the poetry is. Like, you know, it's supposed to feel more like an hour of one cohesive thing where it, you know, kind of pulls in and out of maybe poetry, maybe monologue, maybe, you know, prose, whatever it's going for. Whereas, because I don't even think it needs to necessarily be funny, but I quite like, a good example is like when Shane Koizan came over, he didn't do like a show. He did he did an hour or more than an hour both nights of his poems, but he did totally different sets. But he did, like, we had him 2 nights back to back one year, and he did 2 totally different 70-minute sets, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But like, there were bits in it where he set a flow. Like, there was an emotional arc that he followed, and like there was maybe jokes in his in between banter that he repeated, or like, little bits like that. But he's not worried about, he can throw any poem in that matches the tone for that section of the show. And it, like, I watched him do that, and I guess it's maybe because it's a bigger scene, right? Like, the North American scene, people can... Because they all do that, like Buddy Wakefield and Andrea Gibson and all those sort of North American folk we see over here, they, like, do just an hour of poems. And I find it funny that we don't see more folk doing that here, but, like, maybe it's just there's not the platform for it, right? Do you find you get a chance to do a lot of set stuff? Like, how do you find it as a performer that doesn't kind of promote their own show?
I mean, like pre-COVID or.
Yeah, well, yeah, I suppose, right? It's 2 different worlds.
I mean, yeah. Like you said, I felt like for a while I was still like quite new to the scene. Like I felt like really. I felt like I was still kind of earning my place to be there sometimes. So, like, in the early days when I got, like 10-minute sets and 20-minute sets, I felt like so much. I was like, oh my god, we don't have enough material for this. But, you always need less material than you think you do. By the time you chat and, people clap, hopefully. So, yeah, like, going on to longer sets and then doing, like Amphibious, and, like, having that amount of time, like, with an audience, like, it definitely felt like quite daunting, and I always kind of questioned, like, am I ready for this length, and then but putting on Amphibious was like a really good, I think, experience, even just like for having done our first show and just learning how to do all the the promotional side of it and the things you don't kind of expect, like, you need to do, like, like things like just like, handing out flyers, and that is like an art in itself, to try and convince people that I am worth coming to see on this rainy day. I definitely learned a lot through doing it.
Yeah, never put poetry in the title of your thing; it'll turn them off. Like, that was I noticed that I was standing. My saddest day on the Royal Mile was, we're good friends with the Men with Coconuts, who are like a really talented improv group, and I was standing chatting to Will Nami, a hilarious improv comedian. We're standing chatting on the Royal Mile for a bit, catching up, and then we went our separate ways, and I went, "Loud Poets," and like no one even registered it, and he went, "Improvised Harry Potter musical," and like a huge group of people just cascaded towards him to grab flyers. It was absolutely demoralizing.
Yeah, it's the flying's tough. Like those good days. I know it's like definitely days were just like, they were just really rough. Because Amphibious was like based on like kind of mermaid folklore and stuff like that, and I was kind of dressed in like semi drag for it. Like I did like get dressed up for flyering, so I had on like my like shiny like fish scale leggings, and I had on like a really big crepe wool mustache, and some like makeup and things, so like that definitely helped get people's attention. And if I just shouted like queer mermaids at people, I got more attention. And if I said poetry show did not get quite as much attention as queer mermaids, and then I definitely I got a wee bit more attention. But it was quite scary also, just flyering in like this kind of semi drag, because it got like different reactions from different people. Like there was some kind of older people who ran away really quickly when I like chasing them with a flyer, and also like big groups of lads were quite intimidating. I don't think I've ever really felt that kind of fear before. Like it was strange, and like one guy said to me when I was desperate, so I approached him with a flyer, and he's like, "Oh, mate, I can't take you serious with that shit on your face." And I just thought he meant the mustache, because I hadn't put it on too well that day, and it was always a bit crazy, and it was all like curled at the edges. And I thought he meant this fake mustache, and it wasn't until later on it clicked. He wasn't talking about the mustache. He actually read the mustache is real. He was talking about the makeup, which was a bit like, oh, like that took a while to click. So there was that kind of fear of how, yeah, like people were going to kind of perceive like this get up.
Yeah.
Which was weird. But then also, like, while I was kind of getting that from, like, these guys and, managing that kind of side of it, my wife, like, helped me flyer some days because she's a very good person. But she was, like, saying afterwards that, like, the amount of guys, like, creeping on her because she was out in leggings and trying to sell them something
100%.
was insane. Like, the amount of people who were, like, just being creeps or try to, like pinch her butt or like saying really inappropriate things was just like insane. So yeah, like flyering was
It's
weird.
bad. Like, I mean, we know it because obviously we're like, you know, we've had years where we've had a big crew of folk out flyering, and you know we're a bunch of women, bunch of dudes, and like days that it was a predominantly male team out flyering were less successful than days where a predominantly like female team was out flyering, because like guys will just come over to creep on like women flyers and take the flyers out, and you're like, it's just, you said a big group of lads, and that has never been the start of a good sentence, Gray. So like,
and they were drunk. Just to add to it, they were drunk, which of course makes it better,
right? It can be brutal though, being out on the mile. Like it is hard, you know, out flyering anywhere for your show. It can really, like promoting poetry is tough. I think that's one of the things that I think is like, you see people really learn their craft when they do a solo show in spoken word, because I don't think we have the touring network set up here, you know, where like if you were a comedian, you would do a bunch of those 5-minute gigs in a year. You would do a bunch more 10, you know, as you built up, you would like get that work coming in to hone your skill and like refine your craft, whereas there's so few gigs up here. There's big gaps between like your ability to practice in front of a live audience, and so it's, you see real development in folk when they do a solo show and get that chance to really like perform every night and, you know, promote properly and like really focus in on what they're doing, that you get these sort of big jumps. So
even
it's interesting, it's worth doing, but I hope it comes back this year.
Yeah, me too. Definitely. Like even what you're saying about like practicing, like finding chances to practice. The problem is because like it is such a small scene and there is so few nights that if you practice your material like even at a couple of places, chances are that was your audience for the Fringe as well. Like you've got the same audience like a lot of the time, and you think like you're just battering people with the same poems. So yeah, they're having that kind of different chances to perform. What I've discovered, like one of my favourite places to perform. I mean, I like, don't get me wrong, I love poetry nights, especially like nights like Loud Poets where it is like just poetry. Like that is like so cool, and it's so cool that something like that can exist. But I also really like performing at cabaret nights. I quite like being the only poet. There's something kind of special feeling in that. And you get to also like see like loads of different crazy performances, like, you know, everything, like the weird and the wonderful. It's really cool. So I found like branching out into cabaret nights definitely increased chances to perform.
I've had a lot of fun. I was very sad at the news recently that Gilded Balloon in Edinburgh's wrapping up its basement venue, because that's such a shame, because I know Sonic Youth have been running out of there, and Sonic Youth do such good stuff.
Yeah,
like
definitely.
their cabaret nights are amazing. And like I've been to a bunch of other stuff that ran out of Gilded Balloon. I did a gig for Jay Lafferty there, who was running a kind of alternative gig, so it was like there was only ever one straight white guy on the bill, so I got to be the token straight white guy for that show. I was super pleased, and I did the poetry set, and it was so bizarre because everyone else was like a comedian or like comedy tangential, and I just did a poetry set. I didn't even really try and be funny, and the reaction it got was amazing because people were just so surprised. There is something about gigging to folk who don't expect poetry that is.
Yeah, definitely.
It's why I love the Fringe so much, because we kind of market our show as like, if you don't like poetry, come to this, because it's the most palatable form of it, right? Where Andrew Blair once described us as the pop music of poetry, and it's something I embrace wholeheartedly, right? You should have like a gateway in, and it's people who've been dragged along to the show who come out afterwards and like, that was amazing.
Yeah.
I didn't know poetry existed. Like, yeah, it's a whole thing.
I think that's actually one of my favourite compliments to get, is when people say like, oh, I don't normally like poetry, but I liked what you did, and like, yeah, I love that. I feel like I want to be like someone's like gateway drug to poetry. I want to be someone's like gateway poet, because so many people just they have this preconception about poetry and they're not going to like it, and then they see, you know, then they come to certain, you know, spoken word nights, and then they experience like different kinds of poetry, and are like, oh, actually, this is really good, this is really powerful. Yeah, I think that's like one of my favorite kind of comments to get after a gig.
Yeah, I don't think anyone gets the strength of that comment that they're saying either, because you're going, hold on, what you're saying is out of a genre that has existed since the written word, and like all of the millions, billions probably poems that have been written, mine is the only one you like. Damn.
Yes.
That's I don't think they understand the weight of that.
Yeah.
I'll
It's
take it every
it's
time.
a pretty cool compliment to get. And it's something as well about just like sneaking poetry on like unexpecting people. You know, like when, you know, like at like a cabaret night and people are already like a few pints in, you know, and they're expecting burlesque, and then you come up just like armed with words. And people are, you know, they can see them getting a bit nervous, like, all right, what is this? But then, you know, they're stuck. They can't leave. You know, you've got your, you know, your hostage situation, and then you do your poem, and then if they, you know, it turns out at the end that they liked it. Yeah, it's always cool.
So I also wanted to talk to you about, because excuse me, sorry, my throat just gave up. Yeah, I wanted to talk to you a bit about the political stuff you're doing, because I know you did the sort of Green Party political broadcast, and a lot of your work, whether intended to be political or not, is seen as such. Like, is that like a conscious focus for you, Gray, in your writing? Oh, Gray?
You just got cut off there. I didn't really get that.
Oh, sorry about that. I was just asking. I wanted to bring up the sort of like politics stuff with you, because I know you did the Green Party political broadcast, which was awesome to see, and a lot of your work, whether you know you intend it to be or not, is seen as quite political.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on like political poetry?
Yeah, like I don't think I ever really set out to necessarily write like political poetry, but I think poetry is a really good way to get like, you know, an argument across, or to like, you know, share experiences, and I think it's like a really kind of more like human way to talk about issues that sometimes people just like see like in the newspaper, and you know they have an immediate reaction to, where I think poetry kind of is like a different way to have those conversations, and can be a really useful way to have those conversations. You know, for me, I've used, you know, poetry a lot to talk about like queerness and trans issues, which yeah, I mean, for like partly for me it's a nice way to kind of put down things I want to say and share them with people, and then like part of it's also kind of, you know, from a slightly more kind of activist point of view, where I would quite like to, you know, influence the way people think about certain things, especially when it comes to things like trans rights, because there is, you know, that's been such a big issue, you know, big issue. I don't know why it's a big issue in the past few years. Yeah.
But it's an interesting point that, like, because I spoke to Hannah Lavery a bit about, you know, the sort of idea of the conversation of you know, performance, and like she raised it in an interesting way, which was after she did 3 years of work on this theatre piece and then showed it, she had to do a panel after where people asked her questions about her thoughts and stuff on the themes, and she was like, well, the play is my thoughts on the themes, and it took me 3 years to write, so please don't now ask me about, you know, what I think on it, because I'm not going to be as coherent as the play.
Yeah.
And I thought it was such a great way to sum it up, and it kind of applies in a similar way, I think, of like, you spend a lot of time thinking about a piece of work and pouring into it and doing research and, you know, like crafting it, and then some idiot on YouTube will like jump up and be like, wrong, and you're like, this isn't a conversation, it's a performance, right?
That's the problem with doing things online, though. That's like the huge difference is, like, you know, when you do a performance, it's, you know, the poem exists for those few minutes that you're performing it, and then when you're done, it's done. You know, unless someone's like sneakily recorded it, that's it, finished, and, you know, like, it's done. And I mean, if someone wants to come up and tell you their shit opinions, you know, they can. But I find people aren't really that brave in real life. But then when it comes to doing like online things, like I really found this when I started doing things with the BBC The Social, was that, you know, you'd record it and you put it out there, and then once it was out there, it was still out there, and, you know, there's nothing you could do. You can't take it back. You can't change what you've done, and it's just, you know, it's there for people to interpret how they want. And, you know, there's, you know, the comment section where, you know, people really do like to share their opinion, and a lot of people, especially if they don't agree with you, like to share their opinion quite loudly in there. And yeah, when I did the poem with The Social about the getting a haircut as a non-binary person and how that can be difficult at times, like the backlash that got was insane, like just absolutely insane. And it's a poem that I've performed like a lot live, and it's usually got like a really good response. And I've had people come up and say things like, oh yeah, you know, I've never really considered this before, that's changed the way I think about things. Or some people have said like, oh yeah, I came in and I saw there was like gender neutral bathrooms and I freaked out and I thought that was ridiculous, but then I listened to your poem and I was like, of course it makes sense, because, like, you know, where else would you go to the toilet, and this, that and that, and, you know, and it tends to have a good response. But yeah, when things are online, it's totally different, and especially for that poem, that was, yeah, just crazy.
So, like, how did you cope with that then, Gray, when stuff was kind of kicking off? Or do you just, like, tune it out? Is that your sort of best advice for it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of like, yeah, when it's to that extent, I think that's kind of all you can do, really. I, like, when it first kind of kicked off, like, I'm not gonna lie, the first, like, day or two, I was, like, quite overwhelmed with it. I was just... It was crazy because there was literally tens and tens and tens of thousands of people talking about me and shitting on me and saying how much they hated me and how much they hated my poetry and how ridiculous I was. And it was quite a lot. It was quite overwhelming. But yeah, I felt like I had a lot of people like rally around and support, which helped so much. Like so many people from like the poetry community and from like the queer community, and just, yeah, like everyone... like kind of like I felt like everyone was reaching out and offering support, and like that helped like so much. So that, yeah, that helped.
Because it's that thing. Because
I think
where it's like.
What's that?
Oh no, I was just saying it's hard. It's hard to distance and get to that point where you're like, this is not about me or the poem. You know what I mean? Like it's an excuse to have an argument that's happening, regardless of what you're doing a bit as well. Like I think that's always the thing, but it must be impossible to try and remember that at the time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and it's, yeah, definitely just stay out of the comment section and not engage. It was so tempting to, like, especially when they were saying things like, you know, like, oh, it's ridiculous, like, no one struggles getting a haircut, and like you're just making issues up when there isn't issues. And, you know, there's moments where like you start to kind of internalize that and you think like, you know, oh, am I just like, you know, being ridiculous? Like, am I making an issue out of nothing? And, you know, you start kind of, yeah, like taking all that on, and then, you know, but then you kind of step back and go like, no, this isn't actually about me and my poem. And it's so tempting to like to actually get in there and message and reply, because it's like, well, you don't know the background of this. Like I wrote this poem one day when I came out of Barbers after being chucked out for the second time within a week. Like embarrassed and mortified and crying my eyes out and trying to figure out where the hell I can get a haircut. And, you know, it was like just really awful, and it seems so trivial, a haircut, but like really, like, you know, and the poem's not just about getting a haircut, it's about, like, you know, the kind of everyday difficulties of being non-binary in a very binary
but it's
society,
the madness, you know? It's the madness of someone going, that doesn't happen, and you're going, yeah, because it would be outrageous if it did, isn't it? Yeah,
it doesn't happen to you.
Did. Like,
yeah, it's like all these like, yeah,
instead,
like straight white men saying that never happens, and I'm like, it doesn't happen to you. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen to anyone, you know. And it was like people comparing it to like to like other things, like saying like, oh yeah, like, my aunt's dying of cancer, or my granddad was in the war, and or this person's homeless, and there's real issues in the world, and you're talking about trivial things like this, getting a haircut, and it's so tempting just to jump in and like trying to like argue with this, because it's like, yeah, like I'm not saying that like me getting a haircut is more difficult than someone who's battling cancer. Like, of course I'm not saying that, but at the same time, there are people who are non-binary who might be battling cancer, and at the same time, on top of all that, they have the difficulties of being non-binary.
Exactly.
And people just assume, like, oh, you've never had any real problems and stuff. It's like, you don't know my background, like, you don't know like what's happened in my life. There was a point where I found like a massive tumor in my leg, and it grew from like a grape size to like a cooking apple within months, and was acting very cancery. Thankfully it turned out fine. I got it removed and it was all fine. But like throughout that process, like that was all very stressful. But I also had the kind of stresses of being non-binary on top of that, because at the hospital I was getting misgendered constantly. I was getting the wrong name used constantly. I had my nurse who was supposed to like be taking care of me, like the patient liaison person, and she was adamant that when I left hospital after the operation, I would have to leave in a skirt or a dress, and I was like, no. And she was just blatantly arguing this with me, and I was like, would you tell a man he had to leave in a skirt? And she was like, oh, well, no, but I'm just saying you can't wear skinny jeans. And I'm like, well, obviously I'm not going to leave in skinny jeans, and that was like a stressful time. But I also had like the kind of stresses of being non-binary and those difficulties on top of that. And that's, what people kind of just don't realise. And, you kind of hope the poem got these things across, and it didn't. And I think some ways that was the most upsetting thing, was that, they didn't get the poem. And it was when they attacked the poem, they're like, your poem shit. That's when it hurt more. I was like, you can attack me but not my poetry.
Say what you like about, uncontrollable innate characteristics that you have, but don't talk about the hard work you put into writing. Come on. Like, that's
exactly. I mean,
insane.
You can, say how hideous I am. That is fine. But like, leave my words alone. That was an intense time. It's actually coming up to about a year ago now that that happened, which it's just kind of crazy to look back on. But the kind of the shining moment of it was when Piers Morgan like tweeted the poem, because this all happened on Twitter. Like it came out on everywhere, and on Facebook it got a good response for like a month, and that was it. And I thought, oh yeah, it's dying down now. And then suddenly it exploded over on Twitter, and ended up, I think it's got something like 6 million views, this video, and like I don't know how many comments, but I mean they're all bad. It's all really bad. But yeah, Piers Morgan like retweeted it and said like more gendered nonsense and all this sort of thing. So that was the kind of the moment it sparked it off. And I've been saying this like for a whole year now. I'm really meaning to get that like tweet printed out and framed. I'm going to put it in my bathroom, like right above my toilet. So maybe that's something to do for 2021.
Yeah, incredible that a man that thinks the whole world should work specifically for him doesn't understand how a whole group of people want a slight change for them. Like, staggering. Staggering. He is. Oh, what a buffoon. But, like, there's been good political aspects to it as well, right? Like, you did the Scottish Green Party political broadcast. How did that come about? I was kind of like middle of lockdown, and I got an email out of the blue from the director, Don Coots, asking if I would be interested in like working with him to create the Green Party's next political broadcast. He'd filmed the last one, and he'd like seen my poetry online, and he had this idea that he wanted to do a poetry party political broadcast, and because he says, I don't think this has been done before in the UK, and we don't think it has, and he had this idea, and he says, to be honest, I don't know if the Greens will go for it. It's a bit of a kind of risky one, but we can put it to them and see what they think. So yeah, we did, and they kind of just sent me they kind of points to like we're looking to kind of get covered in it, and I just like took a stab at writing something, and yeah, they seem to like it. So there's a wee bit backwards and forwards with
just edits and, putting things in, taking things out. They do a focus group, and it would come back, apparently no one knows what fracking is. Had a bit on fracking that had to come out because no one knows what fracking is, which I just found like crazy. I mean, maybe that's a good thing, people don't know what fracking is. But yeah.
Yeah. A bit distressing.
Yeah, so that line came out and I was like, oh man, that rhymes so well with something. I mean, it's easy for someone to say like, yeah, take that point out, and you're like, right, done. But like that is like, it's so stitched in there with like, a point, and it ties this bit, and it rhymes here and here and here. So when you're cutting this wee bit out, you've then got to try and find ways to like patch it and stitch it back and move things. So yeah, there's a bit of kind of backwards and forwards, and then just like try to find a dry day to film, then that was kind of it. I mean, from the start, like I kind of thought like, oh, this sounds great, but it probably won't happen. Do you know that way when something good comes along, you're kind of like, don't get too excited in case it doesn't happen. So when it finally went out on TV, it was so cool, and I think I kind of underestimated the reach it would have, because I had like the most random people saying to me like, oh, I saw you on TV, and I had like, I don't know how many people texting me pictures of their living room TV, which is so exciting just knowing I was in all these people's living rooms, especially in the middle of COVID. I was like, oh, I was in your home. So that was really cool. That was definitely exciting. I like that.
That's so ace. I think it's really good as well. It shows, it has been interesting seeing the sort of rise of poetry in a specifically like campaigny, advertisey kind of way. Like poetry seems to be very useful for like advertisement, whether that's for products or business or for a part, political party or whatever. It's interesting because it's like a very dynamic, creative way to like get across copy rather than writing some very dry marketing copy. You go, we'll have a lovely poem instead. But I was really impressed. I think it'd be a much better way to go about politics, although of course the Tories would be left out because there's no Tory spoken word artist as far as I know. I take it that was the feedback positive from like the Green Party and stuff? Were they really chuffed with it?
They seemed quite happy with it, which was really cool. Getting like a wee message off Patrick Harvey one morning was nice. I was like, oh, like he was like, thanks. I was like, brilliant, cheers. That was cool. And like doing things like this, like you never kind of expect. You don't know where it's going to kind of come off of it, and then from that you find someone sends you a message like, oh, can you do this gig, and it's sometimes it's months later as well, and you don't realise like how much actually it has done, like exposure wise. Like I know like so many people try and pay you in exposure so often, but like I mean I feel like the exposure I'm used to now is like the kind of social Piers Morgan and however million people seeing it.
Yeah,
I'm like,
people have got to relativize when they give you that.
I've experienced my exposures. That's exposure. Maybe not good exposure, but like that definitely gets your name out there. Some people are like, if you come do this wee gig, it'll be great for your exposure. You're like, nah. But that one definitely was
I'm Twitter famous.
The Green Party.
Awesome. Oh, well, I'm glad that there's like been some good stuff coming out of the dumpster fire that is 2020 for you, Gray. I hope 2021 is better. It's been really cool to have you part of Return to Form. And I know when get back to live gigs, you're always one of the people that is top of our list to get in. So hopefully it won't be too long until we can see you in the flesh again as a real person, that we could maybe have a hug or something. It would be delightful. But before you go, would you be up for giving us a wee poem?
Yeah, definitely. That sounds good.
Amazing.
So this poem is called Banana Bread. And it's a lockdown poem. I wrote one of the few lockdown poems. I didn't write many, but I did write this one. Things have been different lately, haven't they? Like the old guy downstairs who usually just swears at our dogs. The other day, he gave us banana bread. Said he had 24 bananas on his countertop. Spoiling. Hadn't meant to stockpile, just panic bought. Gave some to everyone in our block. The clothes smell amazing, like home baking for days after. And it's different along the river. Seems we've swapped the usual council concrete walkways for socially distant dirt tracks. Paths carved through dandelions and grass by just a community worth of footfalls. It has been different. Haven't really seen my family. Been filling the gaps with books and box sets. Heard Amazon's doubled their profits, although it looks like about half my friends list is unemployed. A lot of them artists, and Mr. Malik, who drives the buses, he died. Strange, isn't it? Knowing the old normal wasn't good enough, yet still feeling homesick. But what has been different is that lately I found it easier to imagine a different world ahead. A future that's reached in dirt tracks and smells like banana bread. Thanks.
Wow, that's beautiful, Grace. So nice,
Thank
so
you.
nice. I've been unable to write about the current situation. It just bums me out. But it's nice to see people managing to use it to make nicer things out of it. Very good work.
That is the only lockdown poem I've written, and again I wrote it like for something where there was a deadline, or else I probably wouldn't have. But now I'm actually quite happy that like I have at least like written one thing about this like experience. I think, you know, when you're going through it, it is kind of hard to do. It's kind of hard to find a creative way to deal with it. I don't know, I found that. I think other people don't. I think some people use like creativity to help them get through, but yeah, it's not really been there for me, this one. I'm in the same boat, but I am like someone who just bottoms out without the push of stuff going on. Like it's hard to get that motivation for me. So I know the feeling, but it has been lovely having you on here for a chat and catching up. And like I said, yeah, I'm very excited for your return to form video to come out. It should be out in a couple of weeks, so keep an eye out for that. Where else can people see stuff from you, Gray? I know you're on Twitter and all that jazz. Where can people catch you? Yeah, Gray Crosbie on Twitter. On Facebook, it's Gray Crosbie Poetry. I'm mostly active on Facebook. Since the Piers thing, I've avoided Twitter, to be honest. I just didn't go back. I share the odd thing. But yeah, any upcoming gigs I post on Facebook. I have merch for sale. My pamphlet of flash fiction, Love Pan Fried, which came out in 2019. Published by Night Errant Press, who are an amazing independent queer Scottish small publisher. So like I post links to where you can buy that, and I also make wee handmade zines occasionally and things. So I post links on Facebook to those things. Also on Instagram, but I actually can't even remember what my name is on Instagram. I don't use that like that often either. So yeah, find me on Facebook. I will try and find Gray's Instagram for you and put it in the link. But go to Facebook. Yeah, I'll fire in some links and stuff of where you can find Gray's work. And like I said, they'll have some cool stuff coming out with us with Return to Form. So please do keep an eye out on that. It is our first ever funded project, and if you want there to be another one, I suggest you all click on it so it gets views, and that'd be super helpful. But for now, this has been the Loudcast. Great, it's been lovely having you. We're going to stick about for a little chat on the Loudcast Extra, so if you want to check that out, jump over to the Patreon channel. But for now, we will see you next time. Gray, say goodbye. Bye.